Welcome to the Authentic Change Podcast. I'm Mike Horn, your host, and this podcast is for leaders and coaches who need and want fresh perspectives on what it means to live and to lead authentically. You're a leader who wants to make a difference, but sometimes you feel stuck. You know there's more to life and to leadership than what you're currently experiencing. It can be tough to figure out how to grow as a leader. You might be reading all the blogs and books, but it still feels like you're not making progress. You might even be feeling like you're doing everything wrong. On Authentic Change with Mike Horn, we interview experts who share their insights on how to live and lead authentically. Our guests are trendsetters in building great leaders, teams, and organizations. We provide fresh perspectives on what it means to live with purpose and authenticity. Welcome to this episode of the Authentic Change Podcast.
Welcome to this episode of the Authentic Change Podcast. I am absolutely delighted to have in the virtual studio today Dr. Marilee Adams. She is an accomplished individual, and it's difficult for me to know where to begin to illustrate her career, her accomplishments, her contributions, particularly in inquiry, and to congratulate her on the August 24th launch of two books, Change Your Questions, Change Your Life, 12 Powerful Tools for Leadership, Coaching, and Results. This is the fourth edition. In the book world, for those in the audience who are aspiring authors, to sell over 400,000 copies of a book in 32 languages is an all-star achievement. Congratulations on the fourth edition. Dr. Marilee Adams of Change Your Questions, Change Your Life, 12 Powerful Tools for Leadership, Coaching, and Results, which we'll talk a little bit about in the podcast. And I also have to let you know that on August 24th, there was a release of a second book by Dr. Marilee Adams, and that was Change Your Questions, Change Your Life Workbook, Master Your Mindset Using Question Thinking. Before I go any further, and I'm going to weave in Dr. Marilee Adams' achievements into our conversation today, I'd like to say welcome.
Well, I am delighted to be here, and I think we could talk for many hours.
Well, thank you, Marilee. I'm so delighted that you're a guest on the Authentic Change Podcast. You have, in many ways, whether it was at the beginning of your career as a psychotherapist in private practice, working with individuals, groups, couples, and families, to your achievements and accomplishments today, including what the releases of the two books recently. What's the origin story behind all of that led you to inquiry? What led you to that? Well, maybe there were some values that shaped that. Could you comment on that, Marilee?
I'm going to make that as succinct as I can because there's a lot of backstory. Oh, and by the way, it's 22 languages, not 32. So I think I should be clear about that. And also a shout out to Andrea Lipton, who worked on the workbook with me.
Oh, super. Thank you.
So origin story, it goes back a long, long way to, I'm one of those driven lifelong learners, and I'm always either in a course or reading, or I always have 5 or 6 books going at once. If you saw my office, you would be appalled at the stacks of books all over the place. And I've not only studied as a therapist in social work and also as a psychologist, and written a textbook in psychology. I've always been fascinated in how people think. And my first book, The Art of the Question, the textbook was about that. And what I've discovered is that there are it's a lot about language. It's so much about language. And it's not just language that we use externally, interpersonally. It's also language we use with ourselves. So the first breakthrough in my own thinking came when I recognized that we all have two mindsets. And I'm going to call one of them a judger mindset and the other a learner mindset. And those two mindsets started life as the learner mindset was the effective mindset. The judger mindset was the fixed mindset. And I just became fascinated in which mindset we put forward at any particular time and how it affects us. And there was a moment in a training, as I've been giving workshops forever, that I put all of that on a flip chart. I drew a line down the middle. And then because I had studied a lot about language, not about languages, but about language and how it impacts us. And so it became sort of natural. I just simply said to the group, how do these two mindsets show up in language? And it turned out, as we examined that the way that it was much more about question asking in learner mindset. And so it was about question asking and curiosity in learner mindset. And it was about statements and being critical in judger mindset. And then I started getting fascinated about not only the questions, as I said, that we ask interpersonally, but how do we think with questions? And that led to, over many years, understanding that we, in fact, really do think with questions, hence the term question thinking. And all that means is we think with questions. So I'm going to give you a very quick story to illustrate that. And making the point that the questions we think with lead to not only our thoughts, our feelings, our behaviors, but also our results. So this is a very quickie, just about how our questions that we're usually not aware of affect all of that. And so when you can get hold of the questions you're asking yourself, then you have a leverage for change, which we'll get to in a minute. So this story is about when we were nomads a long time ago, and the behavior of nomads was driven by the implicit question, how do we get ourselves to water? And I think it's kind of intuitively obvious that a question like that would be behind the behavior of being a nomad and moving towards water. There was a time when the implicit question changed. And that changed question had to have been something like, how do we get water to come to us? And in my thinking, that's like the largest paradigm shift I can imagine, because out of that new question, how do we get water to come to us? All kinds of things occurred that give us the world we have today: agriculture, irrigation, cities away from bodies of water. And so the point is that there's an implicit question that got changed. Now, in the book, Change Your Questions, Change Your Life, it's very explicit, and there's a lot of description, both of question thinking and also of the mindsets, because it turns out that the questions we ask ourselves and others are also dramatically influenced by the mindset we're in at the moment when we ask them. And of course, that mindset impacts the people that we're communicating with and that we're asking questions to. So when people can, first of all, just recognize that they ask themselves questions all the time and learn to observe those questions, and then also know that they are in one mindset or the other, and they can even tell what mindset is driving their questions, that when you have that level of awareness, and remember, awareness is the beginning of change. It's also the foundation
Sure.
for example, emotional intelligence, that level of awareness allows one to say, are the questions I'm asking going to help or hurt? Are they going to get me what I want? Are they going to be useful to others? If the answer is no, what different questions could I ask that would benefit me and the other person and the situation? So it gives us a practical how to by asking ourselves those kinds of questions. And I'll mention the choice map, which is in all of my books, and it's an illustration of mindsets and of the questions that we ask ourselves. And I think at the end, I can tell your listeners how to get a free copy of the choice map because it will illustrate a lot of what we're talking about. But I'll wait till then to.
It will be so helpful. What I often think about in coaching encounters, in the coaching work that I do, as we dissect an issue, as we explore an issue, perhaps that didn't go so well, is I ask a question about, what would happen if you were able to access your rational self at this point? and your work that you've advanced, these ways of thinking, for me, reflecting that kind of question that I ask. It's just to shift the entire context in a different direction.
Well, it also shifts their attention and their energy.
Yes.
So, but what you're actually saying, and then I'm going to tie it back to the mindsets. When we're in judger mindset, we're actually more in a reactive and fear-based, and there's a lot of neuroscience about that. And so returning to rational, not fear-based, is a really good strategy. So judger mindset is more closed-minded and critical. Learner mindset is more open-minded, curious, and accepting. So if we find ourselves, and you would, in a coaching session, be asking, this is my language, my distinctions, but you're picking up the exact same things, Mike, when you say, what would your rational mind? You're wanting the person to return themselves to their, I'm going to be a little nerdy for a minute, to their prefrontal cortex, to access to their emotions, to access to being able to remember their values, and to be able to think more from an open-minded, accepting, and possibility-oriented stance. And the question you asked, which is similar to what I would ask in a coaching session, and often I use the choice map, and I'll just have a client look at the choice map. Where are you right now? And what's giving your thinking? Where would you? And now I'm actually reciting some switching questions because that's the practical how-to. That once you notice you're in judger mindset, which is completely normal, we all have it, we always will. So the idea is not to get rid of it; it's to make friends with it and to understand it and accept it. So once I notice I'm in judger, and here's the key word, I notice this non-judgmentally, like it's a piece of information, then I can ask myself, is this what I want to be thinking or feeling or doing? How is this serving me or the other person? How else can I think about it? I call those switching questions, and we all know how to do this. So it's not like I'm teaching people something new. I'm helping them access something they already know how to do and make it more predictable and reliable so that in any particular situation, they can kind of switch residences from judger to learner and operate out of learner because it is the mindset from which possibility and connection and innovation and collaboration occur. And knowing that, then it becomes really important to be able to notice where we are and make that switch and be able to think differently, see differently, behave differently. And that's where changing your questions comes in, and then be able to literally have different results.
I love the accessibility, the practicality of the approach. Someone with whom I studied with for quite some time, I think used to refer to it as the ability to access the self-authoring mind.
Exactly.
And you know, open yourself up for the possibilities of development.
So what you're referring to is adult development.
Yes.
And in a self-authoring mind, we're able to think about our thinking.
Right.
And being able to think about it with particular distinctions allows us to alter our thinking on purpose, which really is the basis of personal empowerment. And that's why the choice map and the books are all self-coaching, fundamentally.
It's such a great way to, I think, segue into, more about your work, and particularly at the, intersection of integrity and authenticity. And you may have a story or an illustration to that point.
I do. But before we get there, I do want to say something about the material in the book.
Yes, please.
It also relates to that. So, Change Your Questions, Change Your Life is a business and relationship fable. It's a quick read story. That's one of the reasons that it's so sticky. But what really makes it sticky is that the theory works and people read it, start changing naturally, then start sharing it with people. It's the story of a new leader who is failing and very upset about it. He's also not doing so well at home with his wife. His CEO sends him to her own coach, and the coach, Joseph S. Edwards, the S stands for Socrates, by the way. And he teaches Ben, who is our hero, the tools and the methods of question thinking and of working with the mindsets. So that material is laced all through the story. And of course, at the end, we have some success. We have actually quite a lot of success, both in terms of his transformation from what he was so proud of originally, being the answer man, which did not serve him as a leader at all, and turning into an inquiring leader. But there are also 2 chapters in the book about his relationship with his wife. And that was important to me to put in there, because this is a way of thinking and being that we take with us everywhere we go. And that's why I think the book has been so sticky and why it's sold so well, is because there are a myriad of different applications, because the mindset work works. So when I work with an executive in coaching, or if I work with a team, you could have a judger team or a learner team, or an organization that's talking about culture. What we're wanting to do is move towards more learner interactions, more learner thinking, more learner communicating, more learner collaboration. And that's going to make a huge impact on how a team operates, how they even like each other, whether they have each other's back, whether they trust each other. And then, of course, that impacts the culture because, and I'm sure as a coach, Mike, you know this, and I say this to all of my clients who work in organizations, every coaching conversation is also an organizational intervention. Because if you can bring yourself to every interaction from learner and from those perspectives, it's going to impact everything, either implicitly or explicitly. So I wanted to get that part in about
so rich, Marilee. I love the 2 chapters with Ben's wife that describe, I think, a topic that I see increasing attention paid to, which is about reconnecting executives with their families.
Yes.
And the important work that has to take place there.
And keeping them not separated. So being one person at home and one person at work is actually not authentic.
That's right.
And since that's your world, authenticity and integrity, it's really who. In fact, my favorite switching question is, who do I choose to be at this moment?
Yes.
And this moment, and this moment, and this moment, in this situation, who do I choose to be? And I did want to make a note about this before I forgot, because I've looked through your book, which I think is really terrific, by the way.
Thank you.
And I want to add a word to your description of authenticity. And I'm going to say intention is really critical there, because people can say something really terrible and very judger and then go, oh, I was just being honest. If the intention is not to serve and to boost or facilitate or move to better results or connection or relationship, then for me, that's not authentic with at least the values I care about. So that for me is baked into the model. Mm-hmm. But you did ask me about a story, so I'll tell you the story.
Yes. Intent and behavior is everything.
Yes. Yes. And being aware of your intentions.
Yes.
So I was working, I was delivering a leadership development course at a major U.S. organization, so multiple sites in the U.S. And one of the people who was in my training, it was a multi-day training. So he had learned this material, including the mindset work and the switching questions. It turns out that, the second day of the course, he came in late and he came in grinning from ear to ear. So, of course, I asked him and he said, I want to share with you what just happened. So he was working with, there were 3 sites of this company, and they were tasked with creating a contract and a proposal that was a multi-million-dollar opportunity for the organization. And they had been working on it for a year. And the conversations between the 3 sites were increasingly contentious and judger. And we're now at the 11th hour, and they were either going to make this thing work or not. And many millions of dollars were hanging in the balance. And in my language, the learner-judger language, this gentleman described that everybody was being so judger and so finger-pointing and so critical, and they were being critical towards him. And what he was dealing with is that he was asking himself over and over the kind of famous integrity question. If I do X and it shows up on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, or whatever, how will I feel about it? How will my family feel about it? And every time he asked himself that question, I'd feel terrible. I can't say yes to this. So he was taking what was a truly ethical stance, and everybody was frustrated and just wanted him to say, yes, let's get this thing done. And after the first day of the course, that morning before the course, he was on yet another conversation, 3-way conversation, and the usual judger clamor was occurring. And he sat back and he said to himself, there must be something from this course that I can use that would make a difference. And then he said, there's so much judger going on. I wonder what switching questions would help. And so he decided to start asking switching questions. So when there was a break in the noise, the judger noise, he just quietly asked, I wonder how else we could think about this. And of course, they ignored him and the noise went on. The next time there was a pause, he said, I wonder how else we could think about this. And he was doing it really from a neutral learner place. And then about the 3rd or 4th time, he said, I wonder how else we could think about this. And he said, slowly you could hear the judger noise go down and the learner thinking come up. And we began to think together about how else we could think about this. And in fact, they came up with a solution that passed his integrity question test.
Isn't it a great illustration, not only of integrity, but also of how if you change your question, you change your life?
It is a great, and what he then said to us after he told us that story, still grinning, he said, that was a multi-million-dollar question.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, it was. So, I mean, I have lots and lots of stories like that in many teams that I've worked with, but I think that one illustrates nicely where integrity and inquiry come together. And it has to do with the questions we ask ourselves, including, am I being in alignment with my values?
Yes, it is this ability to be self-aware, to work on self, and to use self, right? There's a agency aspect to how you use yourself. And I think it's that interaction that creates authenticity in leadership. And the ability to scale that, as you well know from your work as a coach and consultant to major organizations, the ability to scale that is a challenging feat when you're scaling businesses, geographies.
Oh, you just reminded me, Mike, of something that I always, when I'm teaching leadership, something, and I use this material as the core of when I teach leadership. And so you're familiar with the term leading self, leading others, and using the question thinking and mindset material is fundamental to leading yourself. And particularly when I taught leadership for 10 years at American University. I'm also teaching now at Case Western Reserve University. But when I was at AU, almost all of our students were in the federal government, pretty highly placed. And I would say to them, there's going to come a day when you're leading a major meeting or a press conference, or you're on TV, and somebody is going to throw you a judger's zinger. And your ability to recover quickly and to be able to respond from learner is going to determine not only your reputation, the success of whatever cause or issue you're talking about, it's going to affect everything. So we do all this work to teach ourselves to be strong learners for those moments. And you do not know when those moments are going to come. And for somebody like you, Mike, who does so much work with leaders, you know that everything a leader does, people watch, and their leaders are modeling leadership. Every moment, whether they're in front of a meeting, in front of a camera, or whether they're talking to somebody in the hall, or these days on Zoom, like every interaction matters. So that question that I said to you earlier, who do I choose to be in this moment, is a profoundly important and useful question, not just for us as human beings, but also for leaders, because who I'm being in this moment is going to impact everybody around me and our reputation, how we work together, and the results we get, and whether we have a workplace where people really want to work, where they want to come and contribute, where they want to come and be engaged and enthusiastic and feel like what they're doing makes a difference.
It seems that it's in some ways an exaggeration, an elaboration, all in a good way, that leadership is personal. To the extent that it's informed by a set of values, informed by a set of intents, and certainly experienced in terms of behaviors. I was thinking about some of the parallels to the inner game work, Galway's inner game, and you take it in such a way that makes it that your original work is so accessible. And I'd like to talk about chapter 12 of the book, though, and how that relates to our topics of authenticity and integrity. I think there's a lot there in terms of inspiration.
And chapter 12 just is, what's the title of chapter 12?
It's The Inspiring Leader, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. So I've been adding chapters as the book moves, for every edition. So I needed to be sure.
I think that's it.
Yeah, it is The Inquiring Leader.
Yes.
And so we've talked about a lot of things that illustrate that, because I'm referring to inquiring internally and being authentic about what it is we see, and also about inquiring externally. And it's so important for leaders and everyone to remember that nobody has all the answers. It is not possible to have all the answers. The speed of information is staggeringly fast. So the old model of leadership, like top down, like the leader has all the answers and everybody else salutes, that is just not going to make it. It doesn't make it anymore. And the only way that you gather engagement and trust and real collaboration with people is by asking them questions, by answering their questions, by encouraging them to ask you questions and encouraging them to ask each other questions. So that is, an inquiring leader understands that inquiry is their most important tool.
Mm-hmm.
And in a world of uncertainty, which is always the case, and I would say it's increased exponentially, uncertainty, the only thing we really can count on is our ability to ask questions now, not to be thinking about the past necessarily informed by it. But I say an antidote to uncertainty is inquiry. And sort of paradoxically, the antidote to certainty is inquiry, because sometimes we can be so certain of our position that we're not opening our minds to contributions or questions or even pushback from others that might be really, really important. So having a mindset of curiosity, open-mindedness, authenticity, listening to people. And I'll say something about listening, because our questions also frame how we listen. So if I listen to someone with the question, what dumb thing are they going to say now? I am going to hear something different than if I listen with the question, what invaluable thing will they say now? I'll actually hear differently. So leaders and all of us can notice what questions we're listening with and change those questions as well. And so it turns out that the curiosity and inquiry base becomes foundational basically for everything.
In some of the executive groups I've been lucky and fortunate enough to consult with and enlarge my own growth and understanding about how work gets done in those teams. In some, I've observed an overdrive on inquiry. Very bright, creative people, accomplished individual scientists, engineers, and their curiosity drives them to a firing line of questions. And I've watched the other accomplished individuals on the end of those questions, who are sometimes world-class experts in certain domains of expertise, break down, melt down under this sort of, can you help me understand that a little bit? What's the question for me, Dr. Marilee Adams?
It's not a question for you, but I do have a lot to say about that. So first, to cite a piece of research on by Fredrickson and Losatis, I think, where they looked at, it was a article about human flourishing, and they looked at 60 teams, and one of the things with a whole host of criteria and watching through a one-way mirror and all that. And then they came up with whatever their criteria. 15 of those teams were high performing and the rest were low performing. Then they looked at what was actually going on. And what they discovered is that the high performing teams had a very even mixture of inquiry and advocacy. And I would say learner advocacy, not judger advocacy.
Mm-hmm.
And they were also marked by more positive emotions. The low performing teams, far more advocacy, and that would be like judger advocacy, and very little inquiry. So I think it's important. I think that's really an important context.
Very helpful. Mm-hmm.
But there's more to go. First of all, in a team, you want to figure out ways to get all voices in the room. And we don't have time in this short to talk about the many ways to do that. However, it is useful. I'm going to give you a couple of things that are practical about that. It's useful to know that we ask different kinds of questions at different phases of a meeting. And so in the beginning of a meeting, questions should be more open-ended and information gathering. In the middle of a meeting where the work gets done, there should be a mixture of open and close. At the end, there should be more close-ended questions because you're moving into action and accountability. You could get all of that right and then do it in Judger and it won't work. So oftentimes, and I've worked with a lot of scientists and IT people and have so many stories there. What they have discovered is that if you deliver a question in Judger, even if it sounds Judger to the other person and you didn't intend it that way, you're not inviting that person to engage and think with you. And what you want to do is be inviting people to engage and think together. And
it's really trying to cultivate that learner mindset to generate transformational questions, I would imagine.
That's right. And I also have some things that I train people in doing, like a process I call Q-storming. There's a chapter about it in the book. And it's a way to use for a team to work together to come up with questions that will make the most difference. So, I mean, there's so much to say about that. I remember a team I worked for 9 months. It was a very Judger team. And we used the choice map and this work deeply for 9 months. And they turned themselves into a learner team, which includes being able to use the terms learner and judger. And even somebody to be able, use the term agency earlier, Mike.
Yes.
Agency, which means ownership of yourself and of oneself and of also one's actions and intentions, is critical. And so it's really great in a team when somebody can say, I'm having a Judger moment right now. Give me a little time to get myself back. Or I'm hearing that through Judger ears. What's a learner question that could make a difference here? So,
well, and for practical managerial and perhaps leadership purposes, the learner mindset is that coaching mindset, and that's in part what I love about the choice map, that it integrates in so many ways the concepts that are core to the work that you've been doing, about from choosing moment by moment to understanding that we are impacted in our moments, our thoughts, our feelings, the situation, the circumstances, and that we have a place where we can choose to work or react, and that leads us either through a learner mindset pathway or a judger mindset pathway. And we have the ability, I think, with our curiosity and our learning, and the questions we ask to make the switch.
Yeah, and a few quick things to add to that. Remember, both mindsets are normal. We all have both. And it's really important not to go judger on judger. So when we're judger towards ourselves, that's where self-doubt creeps in. And when we're judger towards others, we can be dismissive and demeaning. To be able to see that, own it, and change it is a very powerful thing. But let's remember there's value. Even sometimes in judger, somebody could be behaving in ways we call judger, but maybe there's a value that's been violated for them, or a piece of information that they think is important that other people aren't hearing. So with that in mind, it's worth a think. What's the value in this person saying? What would be useful? How can we do this together?
What I love is all the ways, as we begin to think about our interview, but I love all the ways in which people are able to access and connect with your work, whether it's through the written materials. And again, with launch of Change Your Question, Change Your Life, 12 Powerful Tools for Leadership Coaching and Results, which just released in August 2022, the 4th edition. And the new book, Change Your Questions, Change Your Life Workbook, Master Your Mindset using question thinking. It's an amazing accomplishment to consider how our choices affect the outcomes that we create.
And to realize, there's a difference between being at choice, recognizing myself as a human being who chooses, is a distinction from I have all those choices.
Yes.
It's very fundamentally who I am is someone who chooses moment by moment by moment, and to bring more awareness and positive intention to our choices changes everything.
Yes, and I was thinking about the great ways to access your work. I mean, whether it's through the books, we've just talked about, whether it's through your work as a coach to leaders and to their teams, whether it's your work as a thought leader in the field, or as a consultant speaker, in any of those ways that people are able to access the body of work you're creating, and our ability to enter into the possibility of that learner mindset that we could always carry with us from moment to moment.
Well, there is, we're most of us, I think, are purpose and mission driven in some way. And so I like to think of my work as helping to contribute to creating both what I call learner living and also to a learner world. And so I'd like to see a choice map in every office, in every classroom, on every refrigerator.
How do people access that? You're going to make it available?
Yes. So the choice map is available at my website, which is inquiryinstitute.com. And you take a short quiz, and then you can download the choice map and also get back some useful information. And we've made it free because we want people to access it.
That's great. So that's at inquiryinstitute.com.
Correct.
You can take a very brief quiz at inquiryinstitute.com and then have an ability to access and download the choice map at inquiryinstitute.com.
Yeah, and there are other things that people can, there are a lot of interviews on there and blogs and resources, most of which there's no fee to. We do have some online courses. One is the Choice Map course, and the other is 7 Days to Learn a Living. Those are both inexpensive and downloadable. People can use them. The workbook that we just released literally takes the reader or the person who's working with the workbook through a similar journey as Ben, so that they have a transformed thinking and results at the end of it about something that's personally meaningful. And what really is inspiring to me is when I do this work and I'm literally there with a company or a government agency, of which we do many, and we watch it happen in front of us and watch something turn around. And all the emails we get, like, it really did change my life. I'm behaving differently with my boss or my spouse or my teenagers. And we have so many wonderful stories like that, that that's what makes me feel like, wow, this is great what we've accomplished so far. And there's so far to go, because I don't think it's a big mystery that Judger is default for all of us. And it takes some work to build the learner muscle, and it's worth doing. And asking questions is worth doing as long as you're asking learner questions, not gotcha questions. Judger questions are gotcha questions. Learner questions are actually curious, engaging, and really wanting to know something, open-minded. And you had asked me before, Mike, to what are some ways, some thoughts to leave people with?
Yes.
And I'm thinking back to the team conversation we had and the leadership conversation, and how important it is to come up with questions. Everybody wants answers, but you can't get the best answers without the best questions. You can't get the best questions without having a curiosity and inquiring mindset. So I'm just going to give you some. The first quote is actually something I dreamt while I was writing The Art of the Question. And that is, a question not asked is a door not opened. And it's literally true. A question not asked is a door not opened, because the possibilities that we're looking for are behind closed doors in our mind. The key is a question. Something else, if you're thinking about a team or a project, and I've done work in some very sensitive areas of the government and with major IT companies. So the following quote really gets them stirred up. And that is, every question missed is a potential crisis waiting to happen. And I say that because I want them to be worried about missing questions, because it is in fact true. And almost any crisis, you could go back and see what questions were missed, the not asking of which led to that crisis. And then also, it's literally true that great results begin with great questions. And so it matters to become an inquiring leader, whether you're at any level, whether you're a leader in an organization or your family or in life. We're all leaders in that way. The great results begin with great questions, and questions really matter. They really are the gold that makes things happen.
As you say, a question not asked is a door not open. Dr.
Correct.
Marilee Adams. To learn more about Marilee and Inquiry Institute, I'd encourage everyone in our audience to go to the website inquiryinstitute.com, and on LinkedIn at Inquiry Institute, and Facebook and Twitter at Marilee Adams. But all of this is going to be in the show notes.
But also to say an email address, if people want to be in touch, is marilee.adams@inquiryinstitute.com.
Perfect. marilee.adams@inquiryinstitute.com as an email address, and another way to be in contact with Dr. Marilee Adams. It's been such a pleasure and a delight for me to be in conversation with you, Marilee, and to have an opportunity to congratulate you on the launch of 2 books this August 2022. It's an amazing accomplishment that furthers your work and all of the advances that you made. And I too look forward to the day when we see choice maps in offices, more offices, and more of our schools as a way of helping us to engage effectively with learner mindsets. Once again, Dr. Marilee Adams, find all the links to her in the show notes, and just as a highlight, inquiryinstitute.com. Once again, thank you, Marilee.
It's been a pleasure, and it's been fun.
And it's been fun. That's it. Until the next episode of the Authentic Change podcast, stay well.
Thank you for listening to the Authentic Change podcast. I'm delighted that you've tuned in to listen. Please visit the show notes for links to topics discussed in today's podcast. To download a free ebook on authentic change and leadership and to subscribe to my newsletter, please visit mike-horn.com. Once again, mike-horne.com, mike-horn.com. Once again, thank you for listening to the Authentic Change podcast.